Hey everyone, it's Colt. I hope you're all doing well and staying sane and safe. Today, I'm going to be reviewing some of your code, some of your submissions. If you can remember all the way back to, I think it was late February or early March, I posted a video prompting you with my first coding challenge, which was to make a stepper form, a multi-step form. There were a couple of requirements. It could be horizontal or vertical, but it needed to be at least 3 steps in the form. Make it look nice if you have time. A lot of you did make it look nice. Vanilla JavaScript, so no React, no other tools, no jQuery, that sort of thing, and roughly 2 hours of working time. Some people went above that, and I'll mention that as I review some of these solutions. Now, I did get 175 or 180 solutions. I actually looked at every single one. I did not review every one, and I did not go over it in this video, although this video is quite long. I picked maybe 25, 30 of the most, I won't say interesting ones, but a diverse group that gives me a couple of things to talk about. So if I did not pick yours, it's not because it was bad or anything like that. It might just be that there was a similar solution or something that looked similar or an approach in the code that was similar. So there's a mixture in this video of a deeper review of actually looking at JavaScript and CSS and trying to highlight some issues, and lighter, fluffier stuff where I show some of the interesting designs and implementations without really critiquing anything. Next week, I'll be posting our second coding challenge, which will be quite a bit different. I'm very excited about this one. It will be fun for some of you. And for those of you who are thinking about changing careers, becoming a software engineer, take a look at my online software engineering bootcamp I launched earlier this year. It comes with a job guarantee, so if you don't get a job after graduation, you don't pay anything. You're matched with a mentor who meets with you one-on-one every week to review your code and answer your questions. We have mentors from companies like Microsoft and Amazon and Airbnb. Take a look at the link in the description, and I'll shut up about it. Let's get started with reviewing your submissions. Alrighty, so we'll begin by taking a quick look at a bunch of submissions, and then we'll spend more time on a couple submissions. We'll talk more about the code, but I wanted to make sure we could, early on, see as many submissions as possible. So this first batch are from students who want to remain anonymous. Here's our first one, serious life advice. So let's see, what's your first name? Okay, I think I have caps lock on. Colt, let's try hitting enter. All right, that works. It's nice. Not everyone's submission has that or supports enter. Which city do you want to visit the most? I would say of the places I haven't been, probably Istanbul. Sure. Okay. We get this nice highlight down here. What's my favorite hobby? I guess right now it's gardening. Hi, are these correct? Desire to Istanbul gardening? Yes. Gardening in Istanbul. All right. So what I like about this submission, just quickly, is that, first of all, I can navigate between the steps. Not everyone implemented that. Now, we're not really going to critique anything here. We'll keep this short. The code is a little bit, it repeats itself a bit, or it's a little clunky if there were a bunch more steps. Just a lot of conditionals for each step. And it might be nicer to move some of this information and logic into this object structure that's already been set up. Although I'm not sure why this person did not use an array here to store this ordered list instead of using numbered keys. Why not just use an array? But anyway, I would move some of this information, some of this stuff that pertains to each step into this data structure where you have other information that pertains to each step. But overall, very nice submission. We'll talk more about accessibility when we dive deeper into some of the other implementations. Next up, we've got this one here, which to be totally honest, I don't know if this was made for this challenge or not, but I just wanted to have some variety here. So we're going to take a look at this movie ticket picker. It looks like we've got our screen here. Big Brother is watching you. Nice little text transform there. And then we've got the ability to pick seats. We can see which seats we're picking, how many, the total. And I think if I click here, yeah, it's just opening up. What is this, Stripe? Some sort of payments here. Anyway, I do like this interface, and we can pick a movie. I guess this is an Italian anonymous student. Let's see, what is that? They live. I think that's a movie, right? Anyway, just fun to take a look at that one. Next up, we've got this stepper form here. A little bit different. Looks like Bootstrap involved here. Let's enter in an email or an invalid email. I'll hit enter. Okay, so the colors change. I'm not crazy about having this text pop up here and shift everything out of the way. See if I can get it to go away. Right, you can see how as I hit enter, everything bumps up. Very common to see, but there are better ways of approaching this. It's actually something we'll talk about later as well. Okay, nice little check mark there. Can I go back to step 1? Nope. All right, step 2, enter a password, click submit. Nice. It's a nice submission. And here's a third one, or I think fourth, lost track here. Let's try an invalid email. Okay, so enter navigation does not work here. I'll click next, and I am going to have to focus into each input, it looks like. We have a date picker. All right, let's just take a look at the code very quickly. There's a lot of inline on clicks, which I'm never a fan of, although these days with React, it does make it seem more acceptable, but generally I avoid using this. Having to write your code inside of quotes, you don't have to do that with React, fortunately. It just seems clunky, so I would move this out of here. Enter navigation would be nice, or being able to just move on to the next step without having to click next, being able to click up here to move. But overall, nice submission. It meets the requirements. Next up, we'll take a look at this submission from a Tony. Totally gonna butcher this. I don't have a grasp of Norwegian vowels. Tony Strom. All right, we'll try it one more time. Tony Stromsnice. Stromsnace. You'll have to let me know in the comments. Anyway, this is his personal website. I actually think this looks pretty nice. Like these colors, you can see over here his submission. Similar color palette. Appears to know what he likes. For this next challenge, I'll also include a field if you want to submit a link to your personal site or LinkedIn or something to share. Anyway, here is how it works. It's a little bit different. I appreciate the effort that went into this one. It is a horizontal and vertical stepper, a diagonal stepper. Let's just go through this. So please input your first name and surname. Okay. Interesting. So the button appears only when those fields have something. Is that true? Well, I guess I can submit it now. All right. Well, if you're going to go with this approach of showing the button only when something is submitted, or only when the fields have something inside of them, which I think is kind of confusing, honestly. I'm not sure how that plays out for accessibility. If that button is not there, I don't know. It might be fine. But anyway, it should probably go away if I empty these fields, and it doesn't. But I do like this. It's kind of fun approach, and it looks like I can go back. Let's play around with that in a second. So I'll have, I'm not sure about shrimps on a salad. Honestly, I think just cheese and maybe meat. Okay. This is something I noticed earlier. Very minor gripe, but I can't actually select in between very good and amazing. If I move this, the button appears, but if I wanted just where it was, I have to click away and then click back. Anyway, and then we get these lovely cat pics. Okay, so let's see what happens now if I navigate back. I do appreciate being able to do that. Cool, my data's still there, but I can't navigate forward. So if I wanted to fix something from the beginning, I then have to click next, 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 next. Yeah, these are kind of minor gripes. Overall, this is a very good submission. But let's take a look at the code. There are a couple of things that stand out right away to me. First of all, just the fact that there are no labels here is problematic. This is something I saw across many submissions, and it's honestly something I do all the time too. When I'm just putting something together quickly, labels are often the first thing to be ignored, even though they're important. But in a production app, they are essential for accessibility. Next up, these buttons here. If we take a look, and we'll talk about how this code is structured in a bit. If we look at this code here, this is the code that actually results in the clickable button, the next button, and it's a div. So not really a good use for a div. There's a button element that would be a better choice. Same thing for this up here. These are divs, and they're clickable. There's a little bit more flexibility there. Some people might argue that a div makes more sense, but these are really just buttons, honestly. There's nothing else that they do. You click them, and that's it. So I would make those buttons, and I would make these buttons as well, not divs. But now let's talk about Tony's approach. This is probably one of the more interesting submissions in terms of structure. Tony's JavaScript stands out as one of the more organized, more thought out solutions. And for spending 2 to 3 hours on this, I'm impressed with what he came up with. Some of the code is just very clean. If I were hiring someone and I saw some of this code in an interview setting or in a take-home project, I would definitely more than consider. I would definitely move them on to the next stage. Tony is a professed React fan and was not happy that he could not use React, but he brought some of the React world into this submission. So the main thing I want to focus on here is the use of tagged template literals. So if you look at his code, there's this array called questions, and this is something a couple people did, but not many, breaking up the different sections, the different questions or input fields into some sort of data structure like an array, where we have an object representing one section or one piece. So that first section is just the intro, I believe, right here. And then there's another section here, and they each have, they're each represented by an object with a name. And then notice we have this HTML and then our string template literal syntax, the backticks, all the way around to there. So Tony defined this HTML template function, this parsing function here, and he uses this all over the place. So keep going down. Here's another section. Here's another one. You can see HTML, backtick. So I do appreciate that approach. I think this is very nice overall, very frameworky, or at least library-y. You can see he's sort of recreating, if you're familiar with React, he's recreating JSX and having his expressions embedded directly in the template. Very, very nice overall, very good approach. And yeah, this is a very nice submission. There's just those minor issues we talked about, mainly around the markup itself, using incorrect elements, not having labels, but overall, very fun approach. Thank you, Tony. I will figure out how to pronounce your last name. This next submission is one of my favorites in terms of just the UI. It's by somebody with the GitHub username of Krianik. Sorry, again, I'm butchering everyone's names here. And it just looks very nice. Technically, on the JavaScript side of things, it's not as complex. It doesn't offer as much as some of the other solutions we'll take a look at. However, the UI is just really nice, and there's some very well done Sass code. And I don't know if these assets were created for this or not, if these are found online, but I do like these assets, even if they're just stock images or vectors. Let me know in the comments if you happen to see this, Mr. or Mrs. Krianik. So let's see what happens. I'll enter my email in about dog@google.com. Submit. Look at that. It's pretty smooth. Put your secret. Okay. Next. Oh, a different direction. And then we get here to submit. It might be a bit over the top to have a separate submit. We might just have that happen when you submit your password, but I did say 3 steps, so it does meet the requirements. Submit. This is a very nice one. The color changes. Let's just go through that one more time. The subtle glow changes in the background, if you can see that. So let's hit those requirements. Next, we got the purple over here. This is tracking our progress. Fills up. Submit. Everything turns green. Yeah, this is very nice. Not super accessible. We're missing labels. Placeholder is not enough. For creating accessible forms. We do need to have a label in there, even if you hide it. But overall, very nice. You can tell you're a very talented designer if you came up with this on your own. Next up, we've got a submission from a Florian Winkler. And this one is nice and trendy looking, got those nice colors and fonts going. And it's just a different approach. So all of the form elements are actually here. They're just disabled at this point, instead of all being completely hidden. So let's just enter some gibberish in here and hit enter. Looks like I'm going to have to hit next. Okay. And we get this nice progress bar continuing with the trendy colors. It looks good. The one critique I have so far, other than the fact that enter did not work there, is that I have to scroll. I have to chase the form down, or the active inputs. It wouldn't be much work just to automatically set the scroll position or bring this to the middle of the page or to the top of the page or wherever it makes sense, because it is a little bit annoying having to hunt that down. But with a couple of tweaks, this could be really nice. So let's hit next. Okay, let's test if back works. So yeah, it looks good. This is a very different solution or implementation than most other students, just in terms of the UI, but I like this. I appreciate it. It looks good. Just again, focusing the user automatically on the active block would be nice, because it's not ideal to have to hunt that down. Otherwise, nice job. Our next submission comes from an Eric Massey. I recognize that name. I think I've talked to him on the forums or on YouTube comments or Udemy. I don't know. But hi, Eric. Thanks for your submission. And I like this one just because it's a bit different. It's not a email, username, password form. It is a pizza creation form. So let's see. I'll select those. This is not at all my pizza order, by the way. I hate olives, but all right. So yeah, it's a little bit slow there, but nice effect if you increase the speed and added some easing. Anyway, the progress updates up top as well. We can see where we are. I would make it a little bit clearer personally, change the color, add a border, something to highlight where we currently are, rather than just this somewhat low contrast gray on gray. Let's see, are there any validations? It does not appear that way, but we do get a nice variety of form inputs. Next step. Any additional comments? No. Submit my order. Thank you for placing. Cool. Let's just try that one more time very quickly. I just want to see if I can navigate backwards. Let's put something in here, name on card. Now let's go back to step 1. Nice. Although, yeah, no, I think that works. Again, I would pick up the speed. And I don't know if we need to go scroll through every single element or every single screen to get back to the beginning. You might just skip the 2 and the 3. I don't know. If it's fast enough, it's not a problem. But thank you for your submission, Eric. A refreshing change of pace, making me hungry. All right, so this next submission is from somebody named, is it Ahmad? He made a pretty smooth, nice-looking stepper form. There are some important, interesting issues that we'll discuss, but first, let's talk about the stuff that I like. The first thing I do like here is that as I'm typing and I hit next, it's a nice little effect there, first of all, that the animation there, but I can go back to a previous step, which you cannot do on a lot of the submissions that we saw, so I appreciate that. Let's fill this out, gmail.com, put a password in there. Okay, let's do a short password, and then I'll click submit. Before I do that, again, this is nice and relatively good experience in terms of going between the different steps. Also, one of the few, I think the only submission that actually implemented back button support. So you can see he's manipulating the, after that hash up there, he's manipulating the step that we're on, which is nice. Maybe overkill for something like this. I'm not sure. If this was a form that had multiple pages instead of just one sort of container with individual inputs, but actually multiple screens that you were seeing, this would be great. It's definitely not a bad thing. Maybe I don't think it is. I think it's nice that he thought about including it. So let's leave it at that. But if I fill this out quickly and I leave an invalid email in there and I go to submit it, you'll see that my information is not validated until the end there, the last step. Now, that might not be an issue in a typical form, where you can see all the inputs at once, but when we're only working with one thing at a time, I would definitely validate as we go. So not as I'm typing, but as I go to the next step, validate each input. Otherwise, it ends up it's just a bit odd to take me back here. But there are some important things I do want to chat about with this code. If we go look at it here, is this it? Here it is. And we go into the index HTML to start. One of the things that I've noticed, and I've actually seen this in a couple submissions, not just for this coding challenge, but I've seen a couple students do this in some other projects. In the meta tag, in the head of their document, they set user scalable to no. Now, this is a somewhat controversial attribute to set here. It basically is disabling zoom. So on a mobile device, for example, if we had a website and you didn't want a user to be able to zoom in and enlarge stuff, usually either by double tapping or by pinching to zoom, you would set this here. And for a long time, Apple and Safari on mobile just completely ignored this. These days, I think they They still allow pinch to zoom like this. Anyway, the point is that it's somewhat controversial because some people argue that you should really never be disabling that. Somebody might need to just read text and, increase the size, and they want to pinch to zoom. But there are situations where it can be nice to have that disabled. There are articles all over the place about this, lots of reasons to never disable it. Apple has its own opinions, and they diverge from Google and Androids and Chromes. Generally, I stay away from adding that in there. And the tool that I use for accessibility purposes, which is called Lighthouse, and it's really, really popular. It flags you if you ever use user scalable and set it to no, because generally you want to avoid preventing somebody from zooming. There's lots of people who rely on that feature in order to read text or to see something that's going on. So I would get rid of that. Next up, if we take a look at the CSS, you can see that Ahmad is using some nice CSS variables. I'm all for that. It's great to see. CSS looks pretty good. One selector that I like to stay away from, things like this here, it's a little bit convoluted in my opinion. Same thing up here. Using this to match class names can be pretty slow depending on the size. So same thing here. Using this syntax, the attribute selector, to do some fuzzy-ish matching of class names, it can be slow. So just depending on how many classes you have and how many elements, I usually stay away from that. I did notice that you're using important twice here. I don't see why you would need to use that. You're writing relatively complex selectors already. So I know that there are many ways you can get around this and not have to write important. So I would get rid of that. But overall, nice CSS, and I like seeing CSS variables being used. Another point that I'll make is that tab navigation kind of breaks this entire thing. So if I just hit tab, it just reveals everything and all those buttons show up. I would probably not allow that. Make sure someone finishes this step before they can tab into all of this other stuff. But the bigger issue, if I open this in Safari and I start filling this out, next, you'll see that nothing is working. What's happening? Well, I ran into this issue. I've been testing all of these submissions in a couple different browsers. The code here is using a method, I don't think I've ever seen before, window.navigator.vibrate. I think this is going back to some Android method or something that some Android devices would support to actually vibrate a phone. Safari does not support that. Chrome ignores it. So it's not the end of the world, but in Safari, it doesn't know what you're talking about, and it throws an error, and it just breaks your application. So I would stay away from using that 100% unless you're positive you're going to only run this on a device that had Vibrate. But none of my devices have it. They don't recognize it. Overall, though, very nice submission, clean code, nice CSS. I would probably consider changing some of these colors. The red is nice, but the use of the gray on the light gray, so the darker gray on the lighter gray, might not be enough contrast according to certain accessibility standards and different tests, so you may need to up that. But overall, very nice, and I like that it can go back between steps. Next up, we have an implementation from Raghav01, and it's a profile creation page, and it looks pretty good. I like some of the shadow effects and stuff going on here, the navigation on the left. So I think I already filled out some of this. We can actually choose a picture too, a nice little touch. All right, I just picked a recent thumbnail I had in my downloads folder. Let's click next. We get that nice color change here. We can see which step we're on. I do wish that I could navigate over here. It seems like these are so clickable. Just looking at them, they look clickable. But overall, I really like this. You can choose your interests or what you're doing here. It looks nice. It's a nice submission. Yes, I wish this was clickable. And I think there's a little bit of jankiness with the validations here. Like if I leave email off and I click next. So that works. It tells me required, which is nice. And I'll put that in there. But then when I go to the next step, I'm getting these lines that are showing up, and those weren't there before. So a little buggy. Now they go away. That is bizarre. I don't know. But overall, very nice, polished At least the appearance is very polished. The contrast might be a little bit low. The gray on gray in terms of accessibility, I might change some of that, but it looks good. Thank you, Raghav01. Thanks. So this next submission is, I think, one of my favorites. It's by somebody named Paul. That's all the information I have on them. Paul 2512C. He has a pretty cool CodePen portfolio. I played around with some of them. I really like this effect. This using masking. Text appears and disappears. The image changes. Anyways, kind of cool stuff. And his is definitely the most polished, or one of the most polished in terms of the actual interface. So I'll just play around with it for a second. I'll start with an email address. Let's do todd@gmail. You can see that I'm getting validations live, and we'll actually talk about that, if that's a good or bad thing. But I do like this little SVG and that animation, so the color change, the number filling up, and I especially like that I can hit enter and just move on to the next piece. So let's see, it's validating my password as I go. I think I need a number. I'll hit enter again, takes me to the button, and I can finish. It looks pretty nice, although I do wish that would fill up, make it feel extra complete. But overall, the interaction is nice. The experience of using it is nice, although there are some considerations about putting your error message up top. So this error is not really associated with any input. As I type in the first input, the email input, it's showing email errors. But then once I move on, it's now showing password errors. And that can be a decent experience. It can range from a decent experience to a horrible experience for somebody who's using a screen reader, because it's unclear, first of all, from a screen reader's perspective, that these are connected in any way. And a screen reader is not going to pay attention to some random piece of text changing. In fact, if we look at it in the editor view here, it is not designated in any way as an important piece of information or content. It's not designated as an error or an alert. It's just a div. So what I would do if you wanted to keep this setup with the error messages up top is at the very least set the role attribute to be alert. So whenever it changes, whenever the information inside of it changes, it will trigger the screen reader to read that out. So that's one option. Another thing that you can look into are these Aria live regions. This is another way of achieving basically the same thing, increasing the accessibility of these error messages. Another thing, though, alongside the location of this error message is the running of the validations. Now, this is something that I think there's a bit of disagreement on, but what I've always been taught and what I've read about is that doing live validations like this can be poor for accessibility. Even though it's a nice experience for a lot of people, if you do have the role set to alert here and it's changing. So as I'm typing here, it just changed, that error message changed. That's going to be read out loud to me as I'm typing, and that could be a poor experience if you're using a screen reader. So there are ways of keeping this live validation, but then doing something differently for users who are on a screen reader, where you could wait to validate until they hit enter or they tab out or they move on to the next field. Otherwise, it can be a poor experience. But anyway, overall, nice, really minor thing, but this kind of bothers me. These numbers look slightly fuzzy when they're filled in, and I think it's because the stroke in there is, you have that black with a white outline. So I would just change that to be all white or all black. It just looks a little bit hazy to me, and I do have my glasses on, so I think my eyes are not deceiving me. Overall, though, very nice, very smooth experience of using this. I'm a big fan of this one. He was one of the only people who actually managed focus. So as I'm changing here and I hit enter, I don't have to click into the next input. Pretty simple to implement, but a very substantial change from a user's perspective. So here's our next submission. It comes from a developer named Salah from Morocco, from Casablanca. I do really like a couple of things about this submission. First of all, before we look at the code, let's just look at the submission. So I'll enter a username here. How about Salah? Okay, no enter navigation, so that's something I would update. But overall, I like some of these pieces. I like some of the UI. Now, I don't know if this would fly really for a company with a team of designers, and it's still probably not something that you would see in a production app. But for this 2-hour challenge, I think this looks good. My computer is not happy about these animations. I don't think that's a performance issue with these animations. Okay, I need to make sure they match. Let's just do a 2-character password. We'll submit. All right, thanks for submitting. So it looks good. I don't think I can navigate with these. I wish I could, but that's something I'm saying for quite a few of these submissions. Given the time limit, I think this is a very nice submission. All right, so a couple of things I like is the structure here. This is built as a stepper class, and you could easily extend this or reuse this so that you could have a stepper with 10 steps or with 2 steps. And you can see it being instantiated down here. New stepper, give it an ID, give it a steps array, pass in some objects representing a step, inputs. So this is nice. I think this is very nice, this structure, especially if you had reason to reuse your stepper, or you were going to have multiple steppers across a page or across a single form or website or whatever it is. I would probably break this method up a tiny bit. It's a little bit nested here. So what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 3 levels of conditionals. It's not horrible, but I might break it up a bit. But honestly, this code is pretty clean. Looks good to me. But one thing I really appreciate is that Salah, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, wrote a nice, short but nice README. It looks good on GitHub. I included a GIF here, which I think just makes things very nice. It's great to have that, especially if people are going to be coming across your GitHub. Yes, this is simple enough, nothing crazy, but if you're doing this for everything that you have, tiny little coding challenges like this or large applications, it's a really important habit to get into. So yeah, including a link to see the deployed version, a GIF. I'm a fan. So thank you for the submission. The code is clean, well organized. I like the structure using the class. And yeah, there's a lot of nice to haves, right? It'd be good if we could navigate this way, if I could use the enter key, if we had better validations. But overall, very good. Next up, we have a submission coming from a Werner Barnard. I probably totally butchered that. Is it Werner? Is it Barnard? Well, this is his submission here. Let's just go through it first. What is your name? All right. Let's, I guess I'll just use my name. Can I hit enter? Okay. So that's the first thing a lot of these submissions have, is that you can't use keyboard navigation. What is your favorite color? So you got to click, obviously, purple. What make of car are you driving? How about bike? And are you a dog or cat person? Oh, geez. Why is it always a binary choice? I'm bipedal. Let's go with dog, I guess, even though I own cats. I don't own cats. I live with cats. Hi, my name is Cold. I drive a purple bike, and I have a picture of my dog in my wallet. Do you want to see it? Okay. Oh, my Lord. Had to get out of that quickly. Well, thank you, Werner, for your submission. Let's talk about a couple of things. Right off the bat, this is a really easy mistake to make, but technically, these symbols, like the greater than sign, less than sign, are characters that are used in HTML, and it's invalid to just include them unless you escape them. And if we take a look there, they're not escaped. Don't need to spend too much time on this, but there's no entity code, which is what you would need to use in order to have valid HTML here. So not a huge deal, but think about how HTML uses those brackets all the time for its tag syntax, so you want to avoid that. We also talked about how keyboard navigation is not really a thing here, and that is a frustrating experience overall. But I do like how we've got this highlight as we navigate. We can see what step we're on. It'd be nice if we could click to move steps, but there's a time limit on this, and there's so many nice to have features. Another trend is that the inputs don't have labels, which is problematic for accessibility purposes. Let's go look at the GitHub repo for this. Another thing that stood out is just the use of divs everywhere. So I would use some more semantic elements like sections. You could have a header, a nav. For this here, you could consider that a nav, definitely. So I would break things up. Also, I noticed that H3s are used for the questions, the prompts. There's no H2, so there's an H1 here, and then an H3. Technically, there should be an H2 in between somewhere, or this should just be an H2, or this could be something else. It could be a paragraph or really anything. Well, I shouldn't say anything. It shouldn't be an H5 or something like that. But if you're going to use heading elements, make sure you're using them correctly. So here's another one. Stepper form. I'm going to have to focus in there. Okay, so what will name be? Everything starts off red. Let me just refresh. Is that the case? It's always... So that's not... Personally, in my opinion, that's not ideal. I also don't know about having this previous button here showing at the beginning, but these are such minor gripes. Let's just make sure it works. So name here, I'll just do my name, let's do an invalid email like that. And password, okay, next. Looks like I cannot, enter did work there, okay. Let's try going previous. So there is some validation here. That is nice, but it did not trigger until I came back. Interesting. Let's see. Country, are these required? Doesn't look that way. What do I prefer? Oh, boy. I grew up at the sea and the mountains. Divorced parents. I guess mountains. Purple. Let's see. Are there validations here? Okay. Kind of, but they don't actually prevent me from submitting. So I do like this effect here, that animation. You could refine it, definitely polish it up a bit, but overall, very nice submission and meets all the requirements. Yes, it'd be nice if we could click and if the validations were a little bit spiffier, but overall, very good. And then we've got this submission here. So this one, it leaves a little to be desired in terms of UI. It's, it's not horrendous by any means, but it's not slick, but there are some things I like about this one. So let's start some typing in here. Colt@gmail, or let's just do GM. Continue. Invalid. All right, so I cannot submit. Colt@gmail.com. All right, now we have that accordion-ish animation. Start typing in there. I do wish the focus was in this input automatically. That's a trend we'll see. Let's continue. Same thing here. It looks like I get a random code each time. Last time I did this was different. 4489. Okay. So enter navigation is not working. I do have to click there. And then shoot the messenger. I do not condone violence against mailmen. But let's just see what happens. Let's not shoot the doctor, especially in these days. Let's not shoot anyone. But creative last piece of the form. And it looks like I can go back to previous steps. So that's nice. This one meets the requirements. Nice job, Mr./Mrs. Anonymous. Next up, we've got a lovely Corgi themed submission from a Thomas Eckert. Thomas. And here's his Twitter. Put it on there. Might as well plug it. Here's his personal site. Cool stuff. And here is his submission. So we've got a beautiful Corgi there. Love it. Let's enter a name here. Let's go with Ryder, which honestly, I'm sure there are Corgis named Ryder. Probably spoiled children running around Hollywood named Ryder too. It's kind of a cool name. All right, I'll hit enter here to submit. Looks good. One thing that is kind of obnoxious, but this is definitely common in these submissions, is having to click to focus. So I can hit enter again, and then I have to click most of the time if this was a production application. Obviously, this is very simple and there's time constraints, but in the real world, if you did have a multi-step form, you would absolutely want to have that focus set automatically. Let's submit. I guess I should take this seriously. How about burrito? I screwed up the middle. Ryder is blah, 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 and loves burrito. Nice. Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate the dog references in there. Next up, we have a submission from somebody with the GitHub username of Critters. It looks like this. So let's play around with it first. Enter a username. Okay. So we'll enter a username. How about Tammy? Oh, look at that. Nice validation there as I'm typing, and the messaging is not shifting things around. Let's see what happened at the beginning. Did it shift it? Nope. It replaced it. That's nice. I really like that it's not shifting everything. We don't get that annoying, what would I call that other than shift? I just said shift like 5 times in a row. There's got to be a better term for that. It's nice that that doesn't happen. So we get these live validations. Okay, I'm going to hit enter here. So this is not a form. So when I hit enter, it's not submitting anything. It's not moving me on to the next thing. I do have to click. So that would be one thing I would definitely change in this implementation. add an email address. So I also have to focus manually. Ideally, we would have that focus here automatically. And this is a trend with a lot of the submissions. It was not a requirement or anything like that to manage focus, but if you were actually making a form like this, it would be pretty obnoxious to have to click each time into the input. It would be way better just to have the focus automatically in that input. So let's type an email. We'll try that. Looking good. Same issue here. What I do like that not many people did is that I can actually go back and edit things. Which I appreciate, although I do have to click next for each step. Ideally, I could click edit, and then I could just jump back to step 3, but I can't do that. I have to go to 2 and then to 3. But overall, still, I appreciate that feature. And then we'll enter a password. Nice error text again. The validations are great. Confirm. Let's see. So there we did get that little shift, but overall, nice validations, nice error messaging. And I'll click finish. And I do appreciate this one. This person's Google search history as they were creating this. Very relatable. JavaScript, split string over multiple lines. How to CSS. How to CSS inputs. I appreciate this person, Critters, sharing it. So let's take a look at their code briefly. All right, so this is the code. Couple of things. First of all, right off the bat, I'm not a fan of doing everything in a single HTML file. I would split this up into a JavaScript file, but not a huge deal at all. But if we look at the markup, pretty much everything is a div. There are divs with a class of section, for example. I would just use the section element instead. It's what it's made for designating sections of content on your page. So it's a good fit instead of just spamming divs everywhere. Also, I would either use form elements or at least a form element in your markup, or replicate the functionality where I can hit enter to go to the next step. I'm spamming enter right now. It's not doing anything. But if we had forms in there, we could make that work, or if these are inputs in a single form. Or you can write JavaScript to figure that out. Other things, looking at the code here, overall, it's pretty good. The validations here, validate email, validate password, validate the check. These could be dried up a bit. Also validate username. As nice as it can be to have a standalone function, it's very clear, right? This validates email, this validates username. There are definitely ways you could clean this up. You could just make a validate function, and that validate function could either accept a regular expression or some sort of validator object that you set up, or you could actually add the validation information to the inputs as metadata. You could put a data attribute on each input that included a regular expression or something. And that way, you could just write a generic validate that would take the current input, look for the regular expression on that input, on that data attribute, and use it. But overall, really not a big deal, and kind of a matter of opinion anyway. Some people would prefer you to be explicit like this. But overall, very good job. Some minor gripes. It's kind of going to be the theme for most of these. But the biggest thing here is just the navigation is kind of obnoxious, having to click. But I do appreciate that we can go back and edit, and the feedback, the error messaging is very nice. Thank you, Critters. All right, so we'll keep going here. This is a submission from a Biraj. I'm really sorry if I'm butchering your names. But this is his GitHub profile. He did not want to remain anonymous, so he's exposed now. Here's his submission. Let's see if it works and meets the requirements. So username, about fish face. I'll hit enter. Let's see if that works. Nice. Little animation there. Email. So I am going to have to focus. I wish the focus was there automatically. Let's do fish@gmail.com. I'm hitting enter this time, and it's not advancing me. But if I click, it is. Interesting. So it looks like there's a little bit of odd behavior or inconsistent behavior. Now, I do like that this person, or that Barrage, went ahead and added the password preview. And now I've exposed my password. I'm going to have to change all my passwords, geez. But I do like that. This is nice. Let's go to next. And we're at the end. Nice. Let's see what happens if I submit. All right, it just starts over. So overall, this does meet all the requirements. I wish there was a little bit of validation and that enter for navigation would work consistently. But overall, nice. I like that we have the steps down here. Good job, Biraj. I'm really sorry. I hope I'm not screwing it up too much. So the next submission comes by way of an Ivan SK, mystery man here. Here's his submission. I really like the animations on this one. There's some odd behavior around validations, but let's just show you here so I can navigate with enter, which I appreciate. I'm going to type an email that is invalid and maybe a password that's too short. I'll click continue here. I agree to policy, do not send me news, and now I'll select submit. And you'll see that the validations are now running. The form is being submitted, and I'm getting this kind of odd behavior, I think based off of the animation that he's using. The content's hidden over here. So I would either validate as a user moves on, right? So run a validation then using some JavaScript, or validate here. Overall, though, I'm a big fan of those animations. I don't know if everyone likes them, but it's nice to see some good CSS in use here. Overall, it meets the requirements. Nice job, Ivan. The next submission is from a Brendan421, and it looks like this. Yeah, it's not the prettiest thing on earth, but there are some definite things that I like here. First of all, the theme is kind of fun. Booking a one-way flight to Mars. So I'll enter my name, Colt, a zip code. Let's do an old zip code so the creepers can't know my real zip code. Let's see if enter navigation works. All right, so I am going to have to click next. So we go here now. The tab changes to show where we are. Enter an email address. Let's leave it blank. All right, missing email or phone number. So let's just do a simple email and a phone. Does it care? So if I fill in anything here, is that enough? No, it appears it needs to be a real phone number. So let's do a 123-333-4444. Does that satisfy it? Yes, it does. Why do I want to take this trip? Just fill that out. Next. The organizers accept no lie, blah, 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 blah. Very funny. I like the sense of humor here. I accept. What happens if I don't accept? I do need to accept, and I need to agree to pay. All right. And before I click submit, let's test the navigation. So that works. But one of the things I like the most that not many submissions did is just the ability to manually move between the steps. So this is nice. Yes, it's not beautiful. I hope you don't mind me saying that, Brendan. It's not stunning, but it works well, and it has labels. So many of these submissions do not have correctly labeled inputs, a big issue for accessibility. I do wish that the validations were a little bit more specific. I'm not sure why you bundled email and phone together into just one generic error message, missing email or phone number, but overall, a very nice implementation. So that's it for now. Like I said earlier, there are many submissions that I did not have time to get to, but thank you for everyone who did submit, everyone who participated. I promise you, I looked at every single one. It took a bit of time. I had a whole color-coded spreadsheet. It was a lot of work, but I enjoyed it. And next week, I'll be back with a more fun, more challenging challenge, or maybe something out of most of your comfort zones. And we'll be doing the same process again, although hopefully the time frame is a little bit shorter rather than 2+ months like this first one was. So thanks for watching. Again, take a look at my software engineering bootcamp. It's all online. Match with a mentor. Great curriculum, lots of videos. You'll get sick of hearing me. If you don't get a job at the end, you get your money back. So until next week, I guess I'm going away. Thanks for watching. Leave any comments, like the video if you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing if you're not already, and I'll see you next week. Thanks, guys. Bye, everyone. Stay safe.